First speaker today is Jason Scott, an American archivist, historian of technology and filmmaker. He's the creator and owner and maintainer of textfiles.com, a website which archives files from historic bulletin board systems, which brought back memories for me. He's even made a film about BBS, the documentary. He is a free-range archivist at archive.org, the not-for-profit library of millions of free books, movies, software, music, and websites, and more. And really his work is pushing the boundaries of 21st century copyright law. And I was really surprised yesterday, Julia was talking about her work at the Architecture Museum in Finland and about how architecture has changed. So everything is digital there, and you can see how digital is taking over more and more parts of our lives, and we as museums will have to be responsible for collecting digitally, and that brings up all these different questions. Jason being here is really, again, down to Seb, said that I've been working with this guy, we really have to get him on board, and having spent the last 2 days around the conference seeing Jason, I think he's someone who's really interesting by being interested. He's constantly been coming to the sessions and then had comments on them, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your session. So please welcome Jason.
Hey, is this working? Yes, it is working. Oh, it's funny because I was listening to some of the talks yesterday and I was like, oh man, I talk at 5 times this volume. What am I going to do? And the answer is, go for it anyway. So, first of all, just because I like to do highly customized talks, I don't like just giving something the same time each time and then having it recorded and you get to sit all the spoilers beforehand. How many people here have ever heard of me without having just looked it up on the website in the last couple days? Like what kind of they're in for? Okay, not bad. And how many people here have heard of the Internet Archive in some manner or form as a piece? You might have also heard of the Wayback Machine. All right, yeah. Oh, whoa, it's that too, yes. All right, so I am a bombastic person. I am going to paraphrase and say that I also acknowledge the peoples and the cultures that have come here before. I don't come from a country where we do that very well, so I appreciate anyone who's making an effort in that range. I also acknowledge my privilege as a white male in America and as somebody who has gotten where he has gotten, being lifted by many hands, both visible and invisible, to get me where I am, and to act in any way like skill, merit, and personal charisma is why I am so lucky to be a keynote somewhere in Australia would be completely stupid. So please, thanks again for all those unknown people, known and unknown, for all of that. So I was asked to come in to speak at this conference because its theme is risk. And I live a life of some level of weird risk, especially in copyright and getting in people's faces and doing projects that make people look at me sideways and say, there have been so many times I have stood in front of a door and someone has said to me, do you think this is going to be a good idea? And I'm like, no, I don't have any idea, and I go right in. I work at the Internet Archive as a free-range archivist, a title I gave myself. And what that means is that I go around and I find groups that have materials, primarily digital, although sometimes analog, and I interact with them and try to help them get things into where I work. And where I work is the Internet Archive, where it's basically a bigger version of where I used to live, which was textfiles.com. Now, textfiles.com, as Jim mentioned, is a collection of bulletin board system era text files going back to the 1970s and actually antecedents, predecessors and ancestors on the site as well. Everything from RTTY art all the way through to HTML files and PDFs, basically involving just people making stuff. And so if you go to textfiles.com, which has been around since 1998, it's all sorts of bulletin boards and modems and phone lists and what are we going to do about technology. And at the time, I had been collecting it when I was 12. And I was collecting it when I was 12 because my parents got divorced and I felt like nothing was solid. And I realized that if I didn't set out to save something myself, nobody would. This was the lesson that divorce taught me. So I'm very, very, gathering. It can sometimes move over into hoarding, but we'll just act like it's normal. When I worked on the bulletin board system collection, I discovered that there were stories behind it, and that's how I ended up spending 5 years on BBS the documentary. Having finished that and opening it up Creative Commons and just giving it away, I thought, what can I do that's even more obscure? So I did one on text adventures of the 1970s called GitLamp. It's a high-definition movie about text adventures. And then after that, I ended up doing a documentary about DEF CON, the largest hacker convention in America, and doing that with a massive crew and producing that. So I'm still working on documentaries, the 6502 chip, a documentary on the place of arcades, because I very quickly discovered that artifacts and things and stuff and writings are not quite as meaningful if you don't have the people along with them, the stories. Like you can end up with a pile of bones, but if you don't know how those bones laughed and danced, you're only getting a small percentage of the story. I'm also known for saying metadata is a love note to the future. I don't, I believe it, but it's just weird. I've watched it get attributed to me. So if you've ever heard that go by, this is that guy. But the weirdest thing is Sockington. And Sockington is this Twitter cat that I have, and he has 1.4 million followers. And so this cat just says stupid cat things every once in a while, and has earned 1.4 million followers and an awful lot of marketing come-ons. And so the cat gets sent things from marketers. And you can always tell how much a marketer thinks of you as a human being by if they address the cat or not. So when Sockington gets a mail where they're like, oh, little Sockington, would you be interested in supporting the Purina brand category? Yeah, anyway, good old Sockington. This cat does not care about anything. And then so I work at, like I said, archive.org, and to many people, this is archive.org. It's archive.org, the website. You go there, it says Wayback Machine, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff with it, and it is for free. And it's one of the larger sites. It's in the top 250 websites, and it gets used by millions of people every day. And I started working there in 2011, and I want to make clear that I was just hired in because in America, it's very hard to get health insurance. And as a contractor, I wouldn't get the same health insurance, and I was dying. So we brought in this fully employment, which at the time made the founders nervous because I'm kind of a loose cannon, and I rewarded them by being a loose cannon. And still, though, I mean, I've got my blood pressure meds and I've got my kidney stone meds, and I live a much better life thanks to it. But I stress to you, if you hear anything from me you don't like, the Internet Archive did not say it. Jason Scott said it, that bastard. And just please make that division for everybody's happiness. The actual building looks like this. Brewster purchased it in 2006 because, quote unquote, it looked like our logo. Which is a very odd way to buy a building, which used to be a Christian Science church that had been dormant for years and years. And as a result, our meeting room is very nice. What a nice meeting room. It's very august. And in the background, you can see servers. And each one of those servers is 1 petabyte of disk space. We have a working pipe organ, like every website should have. And if you work there for 5 years, or 3 years, they make a little statue of you. Because as Brewster says, we don't have stock options. So you get a little terracotta you. So it's kind of a weird thing. I have mine. He's got little angel wings. He's a weird little guy. And the Internet Archive servers are both here and located elsewhere. And as made the news, we're putting up a mirror in Canada. And so it's petabytes and petabytes and petabytes, 30 petabytes of data at the Internet Archive, which is pretty much all available for people to browse in varying degrees. And this is me doing a light painting. This is exactly what it's like all the time, right here, all the time. You can read books, of course, because we're a library, so you get all these books you can click on and you can read them. We have partners who we have digitized books from all over the world. You can go with our on-site in-page book reader or download the books. It's got pretty good resolution. You can click down and look at the actual imagery. This is okay, this is a violin. But if you get something like this, an old Cinderella book, and you look at the level of detail, it's pretty solid, right? And it's one of these kind of interesting thoughts that Brewster took in, which was, we do a good enough job to a lot of things, instead of doing a perfect job to 12 things. But try to do it in a way that doesn't hurt the thing, right? So we have a book scanner that uses 2 cameras, and this thing can slam through a 300-page book in about 3 minutes. So we are currently scanning 1,000 books a day and putting them into the archive. But we're not stopping with books. Here's records. We're actually doing 78 records. We are providing those in the browser. So if you have a given album, you can actually play it right in the browser. We have all sorts of open albums that people have uploaded to us, provided from us from so many different sources. We have movies. The Prelinger archives are kind of well known for the fact that they're these interesting government public service announcements, North American government service announcements. He also has other weird government and army films. We have these old commercials, but we also have new stuff. We also have weird Saturday morning cartoons and really strange animated pieces of work or weird commercials. And then we have software. And that's what I was brought in for. I was brought in because Brewster said, we can do it. You can read a book in the browser. You can look at a movie in the browser. Can we have it that you can play software in the browser? It seems kind of weird that we have all this software and you can't use it anymore. So when you see something like this, like the festival floppies, each one of these is a floppy disk for DOS. And you can click on it and play it. It'll just boot up a JavaScript-based emulator, and you can just start playing DOS or Windows or consoles like the Atari 2600 or the ZX Spectrum, or being able to play weird one-off machines that only had 1 or 2 games cooked into them, or even arcade games. And we have many arcade games, 600 plus arcade games going back to the 1970s, all up on the internet, all able to be played. It's a little bit small, but you can see some of these have had hundreds of thousands of plays. We also have the Amiga, which I think is a fascinating machine. So we have an Amiga emulator. And we also sometimes just say, let's just put the whole CD-ROM up. So here's the whole CD-ROM. So you can just download a 600 meg CD-ROM image, and we have thousands and thousands of these things, and we're adding many, many more. And I'm very agnostic now about this. Like, I don't try to find the best of. So I'm like, if it's a printer driver floppy from 1993, we'll put it up. If it's a set of QuickTime example files from 1999, let's put that up. Let's just work it out. This is not an industry norm. And we have these other gems that I think people are just kind of, it's weird because once they find out about it, they flip out, and we're like, we've been at it for a while. I just think as somebody who goes out and tries to spread the word about this great place, it's kind of interesting. This is the TV news archive. Type in a phrase, and it will tell you every time that phrase was said in North American news in the last 9 years, and let you click right on it and watch it. Because we're recording all television. We've been recording 40 channels of satellite television for about 10 years. If you need it, we got it. And people are like, that's crazy. Why aren't you in jail? Right? And you're going to hear more and more of that. It's like, you see these things, you're like, you just put up, 2,000 video games? How? And I'm like, well, you compile this thing with Emscripten and you put it in the... No! How can you do that? Who did you ask? The Wayback Machine, of course, is our most famous one, right? The Wayback Machine has been around since 1998, and it came about because my boss's first job that got him the money to build what we think of as the Internet Archive came because he sold a company called Alexa Internet, which was basically ratings for the web in terms of you could go to a website on Alexa and it would say, it's this popular, it uses these things, here are its keywords. This is all 96, so this is all pre-Google. And to do that, Brewster had to download all the websites. to analyze them. So when he sold it to Alexa for a couple $100 million, he had a choice at that point. And I think this is a very critical, important choice to understand. He had $200 million. He could have purchased a Hawaiian island and flown an endangered species to just fight to the death while he watched from a golden tower. He could have done anything he wanted with that money, right? Anybody who was mean to him in high school would just disappear from wherever they lived. And instead, he said, I want to build a library. I've always been saddened by the story of the Library of Alexandria, and I've always been amazed at the idea of what if there was a big human universal library? And he has been dumping his personal fortune into it for decades. And we have all benefited, including the Wayback, which turned out to be a hammer to kill a fly that was an elephant in the distance of let's grab the web. So you type in a word, and there's the web. Now, to some people, this is amazing. And again, other people have gone, how? Why can you do this? If you go into something like MuseumNext.org, you can now see all the captures we've done. So we've captured it 157 times between 2009 and February 2nd. And you're able to go to the museum site, the MuseumNext site, and compare it to how it was to now. So that's the fun. I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen the Wayback Machine, there you go. That's it. Pretty powerful, but there you go. See old things. Things aren't like that anymore. Click it a few times. Oh, they deleted this part. Oh, they added this part. Neat. But it's also a settler of multiple lawsuits. It has killed many patents because there's proof something existed. It has settled a lot of things, and it has pulled out a lot of politicians, leaders, and other liars to show where they claimed one thing and now say that never happened. It's an amazing miracle of the web. It's called one of the crown jewels. It's a huge amount of stuff on the Internet Archive, like I said. Tons of text documents, movies. The software items are relatively new, and we're at billions of web pages now going back. And we're just, while I'm here, this morning, when I woke up at 6, I shoved 400 gigabytes of data into the Internet Archive that I had sitting because I needed to do something. So there you go, 400 gigs today. We probably are pulling in something like 25 or 30 terabytes a day, and we will occasionally pull in even more than that as we get certain things, right? We just, and again, the library and archives world is primarily where this comes from, and I want to stress that I am not a trained librarian. I am not a trained archivist. I am not a trained museum curator. I am a filmmaker. I went to film school. I almost failed that. I went there and I was in the radio station and I was in the comedy group and I did an animation for them and I did newspaper drawings and I was like, life is full of interesting, fun things and I don't want to sit in a room while someone tells me something. And so when somebody says, Jason, we have a name for the thing you're calling this, I go, wow, neat. What I have done, though, is that because I come from a showman's background, I am relatively okay at describing in an emotional manner things that people feel inside but aren't very comfortable getting up in front of hundreds of people and shouting about how they are. At the Internet Archive, we have existed now for 20 years, and we are sitting like in a hot tub of risk. And I also want to take a side moment to say that a lot of the weight of this talk can be somewhat problematic in the context of this jackass, right? This womanizing, moronic, self-deluded, ridiculous, lying jackass has now started to take over the country, or as some people have described it, world's dumbest dog surprisingly caught world's most powerful car. And so we're living in this nightmare of this idiot, and so it's very hard for me to go, ooh, let's discuss IP and copyright in the context of one of my paid members of my stupid golf club pose with a nuclear football like he was at Disneyland kind of crap. So I ask you for one solid moment to ignore that I come from a country where that's happening and focus instead on America's many other flaws, which I am now going to bring up. Because this talk is meant to be, and again, I haven't really cleared it with anyone in the organizers, which is a great amount of trust, which I appreciate, which is to speak to an Australian audience about an American experience of the copyright regime in America, just as like kind of a, so what's that like for you over there? You have fair use, it must be nice. And instead I'm going to tell you that no, it's awful. It is absolutely awful from start to finish. It is so terrifyingly weird, corrupt, odd, bizarre. It is so covered with like a little tiny patch that says, I'm here for the content creator, and instead is just this terrible, overriding a machine that just consumes lives on the way to working with America's top priorities, right? So like, you know, yes, we all live in a world, right, where it's just shiny and chrome. I don't know how many people here have seen this scene. Have you seen this movie? Where this guy just spray paints himself. Shiny and chrome. He's going on to Valhalla. In America, we have perpetual automatic copyright. A lawyer in the room just tightened up and said, wait, but no, we have Okay, so if a bully punches you in the face every time you come out your front door, you can either say, I'm going to be punched in the face every time I go out the front door, or you can say, maybe this time I won't be punched in the face when I go out the front door. Optimist, realist. And the fact is right now we have life plus 70 years, or life plus 95 years if you're a corporation. Do we really think that when it gets up again, when Mickey Mouse is once again up, that we're not going to see it become 150 years? It's perpetual. Even worse, it's automatic. That means that if you make something, it's copyrighted everywhere. Copyright violation in America is worse than murder. It is approached harder and deeper and in more locations than murder. It really seriously is, because we have a lot of deaths in the country, and we also pursue copyright violation as if it is one of the top high crimes of the American state. And copyright has gotten to the point that it has actually superseded reality, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. No copyrighted works in America reverted to the public domain in 2016. They were put there. Someone will say, I wish for this to be in public domain, or somebody licensed it Creative Commons, or something new was discovered from years before that we now think of as the public domain. But a copyrighted item did not automatically become free in 2016, or in 2015, or in 2014, or in 2013, or 12, or 11, or 10. Since 1999 and until 2018, no copyrighted works will revert to the public domain in America. We have now caused a generation of children to never know a time that works that played a part in the culture are free for them to use, remix, or utilize in other ways. This is what we've done to them. Because America's two top exports are war and entertainment. And we're really good at both. We are so good at both. The fact that I could probably have a bunch of people here know in depth with me the plot of Westworld tells you just how intense American culture just shows up everywhere. It is our top export, and war. It is a beautiful, shining, well-made thing. Make no mistake. I mean, we produce some of the finest showstopper, musical, high-budget creations ever. I mean, they're beautiful pieces of work. But somewhere along the line, we decided that this was so important, we needed to change all of reality to ensure that a small group of people who own it would always own it. And we created the idea of intellectual property and we created a regime that we call digital rights management, and we have let it own all of our existence. Our cables watch you, and if our cables think you haven't done something right, they reduce your resolution. That's the HDCP magic. It means that if there's a slight electrical issue with your cable, it will punish you because it's a cop in your plug. The KB Lake CPU just came out. Built into it is DRM, so that if you're doing 4K Netflix and you're not doing it right, it won't let you use it. And it will prevent any routine from being called in the CPU to make a copy of whatever's going through the CPU. It's baked into the hardware. There was something called the Content Protection for Recordable Media, one of the few victories, if you want to call it. There was a secret meeting going on between Toshiba, Seagate, IBM, Matsushita, where they were working to add a chip into every hard drive being manufactured anywhere in the world, so that software could tell it that this particular file can never be copied. And it just happened to make some noise. Everyone got embarrassed and they scattered like cockroaches. Warner, one day, told all libraries that they can't have any released works for 28 days. You're like, how do you do that? The answer is not well. Libraries just went out to the stores and bought them. But they tried. They thought they could. The film, one of the things is that the Motion Picture Association of America likes to really, they love to like buy a website that tells you you're awful and then forget to update it. So if you go to Fight Film Theft, I think it's gone now. But this was about the deadly, life-destroying idea of people holding up camcorders in movie theaters and recording them and producing super shitty versions of Finding Dory and then putting them out there. And so they were like, what should we do about that? And the answer was, well, let's make it that first-time violators can get 3 years in prison and fined up to $250,000. Turns out, the way it's written, it actually works for screenshots. If you take a picture of the screen, you are technically in violation. And you're like, well, that's stupid. Of course nobody would do that. Yes, they did. They pulled a woman out, handcuffed her, because she took a picture. And once the officers, the police, took her to the station, they called the Motion Picture Association of America to ask what to do next. We did this to ourselves. We decided entertainment was the most vital, important thing, and we would change the way our equipment worked, we would change the way our laws worked, and we would deprive a generation of the ability to know about fair use. In the TPP, which when it went down, passages involving the description of a public domain were all stripped by American lawyers, just because they did not want those phrases to show up anywhere in the global discussion. I have files. I have files. So anyway, I'm not supposed to have these files. You didn't see these files. You didn't see this slide, which is I've obscured a bit because it's not supposed to exist. It's a slide in which content creators hired the best minds to say, digital is coming. It's 1993. Modems are still in use. How do we stop this? What can we do? How much time do we have? And they said, you have about 4 years, and then people will start trading your stuff digitally. And how will we do it? And again, this is going to sound like I'm making this up. You can either decide I'm making it up or not. But this was a model which they called defending against the peasants. And in defending against the peasants, they said the best way to defend the crown jewels of from the peasants is to hit them with multiple crazy defenses. That there's no magic word, there's no magic, encryption routine, there's no magic law, there's no magic phrase. Instead, hit them with boiling oil, that's what that is, warning of this, put alligators in here, put a clear sign that they will be hurt, mount guards, put up a parapet. In other words, change how the cables work, change how the hard drives work, change how the TVs work, make everything a multi-$100,000 hit so you can hit people randomly, sue people randomly, and then declare a large education campaign in which you tell kids, because this is a real campaign that exists, explain to kids about the concept of intellectual property in simple primary colors they can understand, and how it's very bad to let their kids share things with others. Anyway, Mebourne has excellent coffee. So by putting this three-prong attack, that's why Americans are really weird. That's why you see all these weird references to, oh my God, can you do this? Or what's this thing? You can see it express itself in a whole variety of other items. We ended up pushing in propaganda, black boxes that you can't get in, and then adding a fear overkill. If I do this wrong, I will go to jail because I made a copy of SpongeBob. Because something about SpongeBob was really funny. And I'm ashamed that this is where it's come to. Like, I love the things we make, and I love that people once could make many different things and not have them immediately pulled into the theory that because you made something, you also are to be protected by these $250,000 judgments, and you buy into having hard drives modified and having computers locked down because you automatically get a copyright every time. But when everything is copyrighted, nothing is copyrighted. It's meaningless, right? It means that every single thing I do, this talk I'm giving is copyrighted. The arrangement of you all are copyrighted. The fact that we have someone doing a scribble in there, that scribble is copyrighted. It ends up meaning whoever has the most money wants it to mean. And that's where we're living right now. That's it. So, sorry about that spoiler. That's kind of like the world that they're in. And so really we have multiple choices here, right? One way is to go, this is fine. Keeps things in line. I can pay $10, I can get Netflix. I'll get to see the movies that I'm allowed to watch. YouTube seems okay. And then we found a way to make it worse. We added automatic content identification. So automatic content identification was the devil's bargain struck by Google and is now used elsewhere. And what that means is they build a database by rules that nobody knows with entities that people kind of know, and those become a set of sounds and visual images that are now considered to be owned by people. And endless robots at Google watch everything that comes to YouTube and declares it good or bad. And they'll take it down, and there's a routine. They'll take it down. They'll give you a takedown notice. They'll take it down, and you have X amount of time to respond, at which point they might put it up or they might not, depending on what you put back, at which point the original entity can do it again until you stop doing it. And they've even made it retroactive. So if you all might know Twitch, there was Twitch and there was something else called Justin TV, and these were community streaming sites. And they had been up for a number of years. Google bought them. They took down Justin TV, so they just deleted 1 petabyte of user-created data. That's gone. Because they only wanted the video game stuff. So the video game stuff stayed up, except any time a video game recording used music that company considered part of the content ID, all of its soundtrack was deleted. Overnight, automatically, with no recourse. It just happened. There was no, okay, I'm sorry, get out of the boat. It was just, now here's all these silent creations, all of these observations, all of these works. And, we can play the whole game of like, but it's gamers. But still, that's crazy. And this robot is perpetual. It's untiring, and even worse, it's inaccurate. MuseOpen was a Kickstarted program which was basically, to me, the kind of reasoned, thoughtful idea that some people might have in more establishment areas. What this guy did was he said, there's no free recordings of Beethoven because they've all been recorded by like Sony. And so if you want it, even though it's 300-year-old music, it's all copyrighted because it's a copyrighted performance. So he started a Kickstarter to get $50,000 to $75,000 and hired a symphony in Czechoslovakia to record all of Beethoven's symphonies and put them up along with all the stems, the individual tracks, along with mixes in superb FLAC form. We're hosting it on the Internet Archive. It's beautiful. And this sounds fantastic, right? Except it triggers off Content ID on YouTube because Sony has works that have Beethoven. So he would upload an example and it would get taken down. And he would upload an example and it would get taken down. And then anybody who uses this fully free, went through all your dumb moves, royalty-free thing, they'll always be taken down on YouTube. That distribution channel is dead to Beethoven. It's owned. And it's happening thousands and thousands of ways. Perpetual tiring. And they want more. They're not happy. In fact, they're very specifically unhappy. They're talking about how free it is and how open it is and how people are pirating things left and right. They want something called notice and stay down. Notice and stay down in America means not only does something get taken down, but anything like that thing can never come back and is deleted before it's even made available. So you can basically say, I own this image of the Eiffel Tower that was shot in this Woody Allen movie. Anything like it can never come back. You'll just be rejected. Anyway. So archive.org. What does archive.org do? Okay, so let's just talk about that. Let's talk about the regime and where we're living with it and how it's going. And I will give a talk about archive.org all around the world about how great it is, and the first question will always be, what about the copyright? Why aren't you in jail? Let's do this. Shiny and chrome! All right. Ha-ha! Hello, friends. Hello, brothers and sisters, to the world of the Internet Archive, where we have everything you could want because we are asking the simple question, what is a library or archive in the 21st century? That is the fundamental question. What is a library? What is an archive? And for here, what is a museum? Is it simply Netflix outside? Is it simply another PDF presented to you with a bunch of restrictions and a $5 charge? What is a library or archive? And don't go to establishment content creators to ask yourself what they want, because, again, I am speaking as my own man and saying this, book publishers kind of want libraries to die. They kind of do. Content creators kind of want to turn museums into glorified theaters, where they are given a piece of something, a licensed work, the science of CSI. Pixar, Cars, that's science-y. And then you pay X amount, and for that, you get the right to have a t-shirt in your t-shirt hut while people walk through it, and you convince yourself you've added to the culture. That's the fundamental problem, right? If you don't know what you are, or if you go for the easy, or if you go for it, they're just going to take more and more, and they're going to put stranger and stranger limitations on you, and it's going to get a little weird. There's a limitation in Kindle ebooks that you can't read them out loud. That's a separate right that you pay for. It's called an audio right. Okay? You're like, well, that doesn't sound very real. No, it's real. Same thing with the right to pass it, to read it to your kids, to have two people looking at it at once. That's not allowed in the license. In America, if you show an image on a screen bigger than 10 feet, you are a theater. If you have software and you fail to register that software, you are completely at the mercy of that software deleting itself and deleting everything on your drive with no recourse. That's just kind of baked in there. Oh, it's kind of baked in there. So unless you know what you are, a content creator will create weird rights, and nothing can be said more than that than ebooks. Because ebooks are amazing. Ebooks are what happens when a book publisher says you can have anything you want, and they're like, okay. Only one person can read this virtual book at once. I was so sad. I was at a library conference, and someone explained to me that they had a copy of 50 Shades of Grey that was an ebook that they could only really afford one copy of because it was like $100+ because it was a library rate. And they had 250 women in line to read this book. 250 people were waiting for a file bit to be flipped. That was the thing. Now, you can say 50 Shades of Grey, but you can also say the same thing about textbooks. You can say the same thing about learning items, right? So it comes down to who cares about the content, and at the archive, we care about the content, okay? So here's how it works in America. The way it works in America right now, in 2017, is that there are professional groups who work for content companies. And what they do is they do random Google searches of the names of things that they are being paid to look for. Kanye, Beyonce, Beastie Boys. Then they look for anything that is a search hit. Then they find out who owns it, and then they write them a letter. And for this, they're getting tens of thousands of dollars a month. And they have no idea what they're doing. If you have something called Lollipops with Kanye, if you have a Kanye remix, if you have something that calls something Kanye, you'll still get the letter. And then you write back, if you're somebody who is used to these, and say, I don't think you're real. And they'll often disappear. When we put up the arcade games, I knew there was going to be a problem. I wanted to see who got, I wanted to see if I threw all of 1,000 famous arcade games up on the beach on D-Day, how many would make it to the bunker. 1,000 of them entered the shore, screaming and playing and shooting and going waka, waka, waka. And I'm happy to say that after 2 years, 675 brave items have made it and are still up, and 400 long-forgotten warriors are gone. And it was 7 companies that came out of the woodwork: Nintendo, Atari, Sega, and the Hamster Corporation. Hamster Corporation? Hamster Corporation owns 7 Japanese companies that died. It's just a random file cabinet somewhere in Japan that sends out letters anytime anyone puts up really obscure Japanese games. Atari is 4 people in a file folder in New York whose only job is to tell you that you can't have Centipede and you can't have Asteroids. So you start to know them. The lawyer from Atari and I are on a first-name basis. Her name's Andrea. And the Nintendo. Now, it's also important to notice that there are companies that are another reason why I'm not having this thing distributed, because it's not good to talk like this in public. There's Nintendo, and then there's every other company in terms of IP, because Nintendo is nuts. And in terms of writers, there's Harlan Ellison, and then there's everybody else. Harlan Ellison knows how to scream across a phone. And he also claims rights he doesn't have. For instance, he made me take down interviews of him because he claimed that his interview answers were copyrighted works. But with Harlan Ellison, it's better to just push the whole thing into the fire, because Harlan Ellison is crazy. So I know when to pick my battles. In terms of music, obviously music that is very popular right now tends to be approached by various groups, but nobody, and this is critical, nobody's dying. Nobody's getting stabbed in the streets. Letters are flying. And I think until you get your first cease and desist, I think a lot of institutions, perhaps some people who work in this room, a lot of people live in horror and fear and of the risk of having materials up and not being 100% sure of its provenance. I mean, there's true, honest recklessness, and then there's demanding that a beautiful piece of work in which a minor item plays one small part be completely, utterly cleared by whoever you can until you have exhausted all of your research people, that instead of working to make a better display, they're ensuring that one postage stamp size picture of a video game is cleared. I think that's something, I think there's ways around that. I think there's ways to get much more, quote unquote, brave in that. The archive gets 14 or 15 takedown notices a week. We handle it. I didn't say that. There is no benefit for us talking publicly about this. Please don't tweet it, I guess I should say. There's no benefit to talking about lawyers, because lawyers are really not great people sometimes. There's good lawyers. There's friendly cockroaches. But you know, any given entity will be told that a lawyer will always tell a company that there is no point in going the extra mile to make culture more available unless they can guarantee there's money involved, and a significant amount of money. That's the point in America. We live under that every single day. But let me tell you something, okay? So at the archive, millions of people, I mean millions of people every day, these are real numbers, 3 million to 5 million people come and play our old radio shows. They leaf through computer magazines from the 80s that I've put up. They've gone through really old technical manuals or science works. There is a science book from the 30s that talks about electricity. This thing has had hundreds of thousands of downloads, and all I can think is, this must be so many underprivileged persons' first electrical engineering class. Like, it's all just happening there. It's so worth the fight to know what we're doing has an effect on human lives. That's what gets us up in the morning. And if we have to get a few letters that tell us that we suck, I think we can do it, right? There is such beauty in the world. By the way, just as a side note, it'll surprise you who the most fervent defenders of their works are. Woodworking magazines, knitting magazines, I swear to God, ham radio magazines, and the BBC. So the reason why, by the way, is because woodworking and knitting items are evergreen. They have nothing but great use. The manual for the operation of a 1930s sump pump has gone past its expiration date. In other words, we are now living in a world where, at the archive, we're just back to what it goddamn was in the 60s. A few people care, a bunch of people don't care, and we apologize a little. Like, that's literally what it was before 1976 when we passed this ridiculous automatic copyright law. And we screwed up our chance to have what would have been a registrar. I mean, you know, people are like, well, Jason, what kind of regime would you have gone for? I'm like, fine, make it 50 years. And make it that at 50 years, if you re-register and pay your $10, you can keep it another 50. You hero. Because that would cause only a small, infinitesimal percentage of culture to be locked away like it is now. We are now in a drought of 20th century culture that I don't think people really realize. Like, it is so much easier to go ahead and find a folio from the 1800s and do all the things you do with it than it is to walk into a 1960s radical magazine and not be terrified that you're going to get sued into oblivion. That's where we're living right now, and it's going to hurt us a lot, because we did some things in the 20th century. They were relatively violent. They were relatively interesting, too. And we're not going to allow people to treat it in the same way that we learn about previous generations. This, by the way, is an example of just a fun thing. This guy's name is Neil Cicigara. He's also called the Lemon Demon. He's made three albums. One's called Mouth Sounds, Mouth Moods is another one. And he takes, these are straight up mashup albums. So he'll have 14 or 15 commercial songs wrapped into one song where they're making commentary on each other. So it's nothing but guitar solos. Or it's just there's one that has an overlay of 500 miles, the song 500 Miles, with a recording of a woman lauding the amazing capacity of a CD-ROM. So she's talking about 600 megabytes, 300 megabytes, and then other guys are going 500 miles. It's fun. It's harmless. Nobody's going to die. It's just nice. And we have millions of these things going on, right? So my question to you is, like, what's your next move here, right? The archive is living this life right now, and it's weird to me that we're just kind of out there. There aren't many other places. Every once in a while, I'll see an institution. There was one institution just recently that put out 300,000 pictures. There's another organization that has been scanning and putting up all of their items so you can play with them and 3D print them. And I think that's what I'm most worried about. When I get yelled at by professionals, because I do, I used to feel bad. Fix that. I used to feel bad because I didn't understand why they were angry at me. And the reason they were angry at me was because I had all of this agency and I didn't deserve it. Because I'm just some idiot with no degree. But people out there who have been training, and if you're somebody who runs things, people under you who have been training, who have secret Twitter files where they express their frustration because they can't make any choices. I'm worried that there's this amazing pool of people in the world who don't have agency to try new things, and that organizations will occasionally do one radical idea and then force everybody into the radical idea as a, kind of default, like, let's all work together on my brilliant out-of-the-box idea, but don't fall out of the box that I've built of my new idea. And I think that is rampant. That's from an outsider, but I feel it's rampant, and it causes all of this skill to be lost. And meanwhile, a millionaire somewhere in California is lapping everybody in terms of making things available by just putting the neck out a little bit. I think institutions, I recognize that in the talks I've heard so far. People in these institutions know that they're pillars of these communities. They're boxes and buildings, and they're these glorious locations that are like could be the community center. And maybe if they make a choice, it's for a good reason. And if somebody disagrees, they'll reason with them. I think that's a position that in America is almost gone because of fear of copyright. They all want the magic spell. They all want me to use a word. Oh, it's a fibber-fobble. And if they say that to Sony, that nobody will sue them. And it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. The best word, I guess, is I'm sorry. It probably won't happen again. Closest spell I got. And I want to make clear that what the Internet Archive is doing, what I'm doing, is not really bravery. It's not. Bravery is being the only library in your town and you're arguing with one of the city council members about having a Judy Blume book in your library because you think young girls should read it, and one person disagrees and your job is on the line. That's bravery? Bravery is sitting with a woman who's 80 years old, just trying to help her for 2 hours on how to click on links because she can't quite see it, and you're helping her figure out settings on her laptop so it's big enough that she can read it. That's bravery, letting somebody browse something that's really untoward and figuring out to say, okay, that's their gig. Let's put them this way, aimed this way. Let's not have their screen be the first thing you see. And give it to them. And let's adapt us because that's the needs of our community, whether we like it or not. That's the needs of our community. Like, that's bravery to me. So I never, ever, ever want to say what I'm doing is bravery. All I'm doing is having fun. Every single morning I wake up and I'm like, what am I going to archive today? And I go to bed going, that was a lot of archiving. And In my dreams, I'm like, I'm archiving these things and I'm dancing on them. It's a very fun life. I appreciate it every single day. It's a risky life by some standards, sure, occasionally get weird suits, weird lawsuits, weird things. I had a guy sue me for $2 billion once. Great story. I'll have to get that some other time. You know, life is not something you should get to the end of and get into your bed as your heart's failing and say, well, at least I didn't make a fuss, right? It really isn't. Please take a little risk, do something different, have a lot of fun. Thank you for listening. Shiny and Chrome. If somebody has a question that's not a soliloquy about themselves, I would love to hear it.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Yes.
I'm Pat Afterheady from American University, and I also consult with the Internet Archive. And I cannot admire enough your spirit and the work that Internet Archive has done, but I'm absolutely puzzled about representing what you're doing as implying, at least, that in some way it's violating copyright. Because overwhelmingly, as you know, I think, the Internet Archive has been an absolute model of how to employ fair use or exception in the service of archiving,
Sure.
as well as employing, as well as using good judgment about orphan works.
Right.
And managing what I know to be the constant flow of complaints from copyright holders very reasonably, because the lawyers really do understand fair use. And Brewster has just been such a model about that, that I would just like to flag that. And I kept
Sure.
waiting for you to point out that the Internet Archive is not, in fact, in violation of American law.
So here's the thing. I know, and you are correct, which is why, first of all, I always make it clear, I'm me. Brewster has said, you make me feel like I probably make the Library of Congress feel, is the way he phrases about me. Because I'm a little nuts. I'm a little off the thing because I want the world in a certain way, and I'm very loud and brash. And the Internet Archive as a whole respects copyright and respects fair use. It does. But the problem is that in America, people tell you you're violating copyright even when you're not, right? That's kind of where I'm going with that. I'm not really maybe I'm not answering it right, but I'm telling you that Brewster and the way that we have approached all the things, from our open library site to how we produce things to how we respond to people, we don't go running at the first try. We don't run away from people accusing us of things. We reason with them. We show them what we are. We make a point of losing money every time you click. We're like, if you're really angry at us, keep reading. We're not putting up ads. We're not providing a monetary incentive. And this is all very, odd in a lawyerly way. And I am not a lawyer. But what bothers, what kind of the point of my talk and what I'm talking about is how much all of this is being done in a solitary manner by the archive, and how few institutions in the U.S. that aren't a Samsadat organized group of volunteers exist for us. And I really wish there were more. That's kind of it. Was that right? I can never tell. Am I there? Sorry. Yeah. just Pat. Here's the thing. I have talked to Pat on and off for 2 days. I super respect Pat, and just because I'm standing on a friggin' stage and she's in a chair, that doesn't mean I'm not the student here.
I want to admire the courage that it took to employ fair use in a digital environment, and correctly, because
Right.
that's what I think the model that IA has set is so important because somebody has to make that first step. And many librarians and archivists and museums would love to do that, but need for somebody else to get out there first because their own trustees and board don't want them to be first.
Right.
And so that's why I think it's important to make sure that people understand that what's being done is not illegal.
Right.
And that's the only
Okay.
point I wanted to add
Oh,
to it,
that's
and
true.
I'm very grateful to you. Thank you.
Okay, no, that's important because I want to make that distinction too, because unfortunately we live in a world of words. Words have meanings. Pictures are pretty. Lies sound good. But yeah, okay. Oh, good. Yes, go ahead. I can hear you, and I'll repeat the question. Can we defend fair use because we have a benefactor who can afford it? Yes. Yes. Whenever I see a content creator sitting and saying, like, you're ruining my book, I want more hard laws, I'm like, you are a mouse standing on the shoulder of a lion arguing about which antelope to take down. It is incredibly expensive to mount a copyright violation suit against somebody else. And it's a years-long, terrible experience that may or may not work in your favor and will cost you time. It does not favor anybody who isn't doing copyright enforcement on or IP enforcement on a industrial scale. And there's these weird little dealies that exist. I sometimes find out, for instance, talk shows. If you watch American talk shows, like the band will play a song, like by the Beatles or by somebody else for like a couple seconds when someone comes on stage. There is a $250,000 per year negotiation between all of the record labels and all of the television stations to just have a kind of, well, whatever plays for a few seconds on your talk shows is okay. We don't get that. We don't have that. There's a lot of those. And so people observe them, and they don't know what they're running up against when they find out that there's these other weird collusions in back. So no, the kind of content creators who are out there who are creating items are often working against. So like I said, I created a documentary and I licensed it to Creative Commons, and I pre-sold it because you can't pirate a thing that doesn't exist. And I licensed it Creative Commons because it was going to be copied, so why not be a hero? And it worked out. It worked out so nicely that when my next movie came out, one piracy group refused to release the bonus features, saying he's such a cool guy, and they released it wrong. Like it was interactive, so it had tracks, and they put it in the wrong order. And I opened a blog entry going to to this group. You pirated it wrong. You did tracks 1, 2, 5, 7. Please do 1, 5, 7, 2. And this sold me 3,000 copies from people going, Jesus Christ, what's weird? And so I think that realizing what world you're living in and dealing with it, some authors will release things as serials. Like they'll release a chapter, then a chapter, then a chapter, because you can't. But a lot of the world keeps changing, and I think adapting to that is something people should do. That's a theme that's in this conference already. That's no big bravery of me to say. Anybody else? Or I think we're almost done. I think we have one more question. Jim gives a good one-question face. Hello, Wild Waver. What's up? Yep.
Oh, let's try again. So yeah, thank you. You mentioned that the Internet Archive has been building this recording of television programs in North America.
Yes.
To create essentially a kind of cultural record, which is very
some
valuable.
European too, and other things as we can get it. But yeah, yes.
In recent years, and I have a small bit of experience of this, you mentioned the perpetual untiring robot copyright takedown
Sure.
algorithm thing.
Yep.
Although your talk was very, very inspiring, do you actually feel, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but with the untiring robot algorithm, that we're not going to get any of the stuff from the last 10 years and after that. It's we've kind of lost.
Well, for this moment, bear in mind that the Internet Archive tells those robots to F off, right? We don't have a black box provided to us by a company that watches everything that comes in. YouTube does. That was their negotiation. That's also why there's no Google Books, by the way. And Google Books is essentially not really a functioning project like it used to be, because they can't make enough money off it to justify all the work they'd have to do. So it's kind of a dormant, dead project. And I would say that there's a corpus of material up there, like that's very useful material. And that's why we have it aimed at TV news, because TV news is kind of a good public good. I would love to do infomercials. We've done it also for political ads. So we've actually got some really awesome stuff. And this depresses me so badly. Again, because we had some amazing people from the Sunlight Foundation and other partners, and we put together this amazing way to analyze all of the issues of the last election. And then it just turned into a shit show. It had nothing to do with facts or translating, or it just became a big character. It proved once again that a fully prepared woman can be overcome by an idiot guy who wings it. And that was it. Dun, 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 dun. And it was so sad because there were tools in there that would show you which lines from the debates were cited in the most news programs. Amazing analysis. And when we have a real election, it's going to come in really nicely. But that kind of stuff is going on. If you go to the archive.org/911, trigger warning, you can watch all of the news that played the week of 9/11 and see how each station responded to it for a week. And it's very insightful. And up on the top, it tells you what's happening in real time. And you can find out like how different places reacted. It's an amazing tool. And people find out that exists, and they're like, that's amazing. So the answer is, yeah, I mean, if we were to like dump it on YouTube, YouTube would yank it down in seconds. But it's not on YouTube. There you go. Thanks so much. Thanks so much.